to see you.
Good to see you. I'm adjusting my camera a little so I'm not so close.
All right. So hi, I'm David Legere of Woodhall Press, and you're tuned in to Publish This Over Lunch. I'm joined today by ELLIE ARAIZA, who is an artistic jack of all trades. ELLIE was born in Mexico and moved to the US in her teens and went on to become a powerhouse artist in LA with multiple award-winning shorts and feature films, voiceover work, had parts on NCIS, Legion, The Bridge, right, among others. Oh, and if it wasn't enough, she also wrote and starred in her own woman's show that was featured at IO West for 7 months called Turtle Love. Blogger, short film writer, feature screenplay writer, you name it, right? She's done it. So for more information, visit her at elliearaiza.com. Ellie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Especially, it's not actually lunch for you, right? It's 9 a.m. Like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, it's lunch here, but.
I'm so glad we figured that out yesterday because I would have been just like in pajamas right now. I actually put my makeup. This is the earliest I've ever put my makeup on. I think this is
All right, so breakfast with ELLIE ARAIZA. Here we are today.
I got my
so
plug.
just to kick it off, would you, start us off with something you found incredibly inspiring in 2020, right? I've been hearing it's tough to find that inspiration, and I'm looking for positive. So, like, what's something you're finding so inspiring in 2020?
Well, I think I'm an odd duck because what I've actually found inspiring is the confinement, which I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with. But for me, I often find that limitations kind of give me a really clear idea of what I have to work with and actually inspire my creativity. So when the lockdown happened and shelter in place happened, I mean, I started just making lists of everything I could do from home. I got inspired. I was like, I can make a music video. I can make a comedy thing. I could, write a song. I realize I'm privileged in saying that because I know it's a difficult time, for everybody. Thank you, unemployment. But yeah, that's actually been inspiring.
I love that because, we're talking, it's a challenging year, right? Everybody, I've been seeing all these, the memes, it's been tough for many reasons. Mm-hmm. But it's this idea that even though it's difficult, you're still finding inspiration, and the reason I bring that up is because you're an artist, right? In multiple platforms. So, it's a challenge staying inspired. So your life and living, right, is dependent on your artistic output. And you've always amazed me, like you're constantly just producing, right? Every time I talk to you, I see online, you're always doing the next new thing and you've got so much creativity flowing. How do you dig down to that well of inspiration?
That's a good question. Let me tell you, it's not pretty. I think for me, it's a lot of introspection and it is a struggle, to be honest, to find that artistic flow. And there have been times during this whole thing where I've had anxiety and really struggled with worrying about the future, but I keep trying to ground myself. And for me, like journaling helps a lot. And also humor. Like, I think humor is a big part of everything that inspires me. I think it's one of my ways of coping with the pain in life. And so for me, staying in touch with myself by journaling or even doing yoga is a huge part of staying in touch with my own voice. I think it's really easy for things to get muddled and to sort of lose yourself in the madness, So I've kind of made it a consistent practice to keep looking inward, and that's usually where I find that sort of drive or inspiration to make something.
I love that you mentioned journaling, right? Because I think so often people forget about how powerful a journal is, and I've had mentors and teachers over the years who've actually told me to stop journaling, right? Like, if you want to be a writer, don't write anything else down. Just, it should all come from you within. And I actually found the opposite. I've done that and it works, but for me, I love capturing those moments in a journal and being able to reflect back on and step into it again in that mindset.
Yeah, for me,
So
it's
it's good.
unplugging. I don't know about you, but for me, it's almost like, yeah, like it unplugs things so that you know, that sort of artistic flow can come through. Otherwise, you have too much. For me, too much fears, emotions, and stuff kind of wanting to stuff it down, and I need to open it up.
Yeah, yeah. And you touch on humor, which is so important. We had Gina Baruch on here, and you know we have Fast Funny Women coming out with her, and it's this idea of how important is humor, especially in today as things get difficult and challenging. It seems like holding on to humor is more important than ever, that ability to laugh. And they've shown, right, with medical research that laughter promotes health and longevity and happiness, all that stuff. So I love that. So kind of like changing gears slightly, right? Like it's this idea of inspiration. And now I'm sure a lot of people, I'm interested, right, in screenplay writing. So like it's this idea, right? All these writers that are tuned in and listen to this later, we're all writers in some capacity, but we haven't taken that leap maybe into screenplay writing. And I know when I first did my first, you know, screenplay, I copied it offline and I had submitted it to the Connecticut Film Works, you know, a group that I work with, and they're wonderful. And they had said, "What are all these tags in here?" And I was like, I don't know, because I saw them online. So like, how did you get into screenplay writing? Did you have a mentorship? Did you take classes? You know, what's your story?
Yeah, so for me, first it was I wrote the one-woman show Turtle Love, and after that came out, a lot of people kept asking me, well, what's next? Is there a sequel to it? And I started to think of turning it into a feature. So that's where I first sort of started to write at least feature. I'd written like little short films, but hadn't put too much thought into, you know, how to write a screenplay properly. And luckily, a friend of mine was in a writer's group, and I asked her, you know, I was like, hey, you know, do you know a good comedy? Because it was a comedy, you know, comedy writing teacher, or, you know, I want to write the screenplay. And she connected me with this awesome woman, Carol Gordon, who is kind of lived in Hollywood for many, many years and been in the business, and her husband was in the business. And she had this classroom in her living room. I think we just called it Carol's class. And it was, you know, invitation only, and I managed to get in it. And the wonderful thing about this class is it was an incredibly nurturing environment where people didn't get caught up in, you know, is it written perfectly, or are you following all the screenplay rules? You certainly got notes on that, but more than anything, people paid attention to the story and the characters, and they nurtured your strengths, and then they very gently, you know, presented your weaknesses and ways to help yourself. So so that was a wonderful group, and it was once a week, and it forced me to write, because I had to be forced, honestly, otherwise I wouldn't have done it. I think that's one of the hardest things about writing. I think most writers will agree. One of the hardest things about writing is just sitting down and starting. And when I personally I do well with deadlines, I do well with accountability. So that class gave me that. You have 15 pages to write. You have to write them by next week, and you have to cast it. You know, we cast from the group. And next thing you know, I mean, I was in the class, I want to say 6 or 7 years, and ended up writing 3 feature screenplays that are still works in progress, and I'm still learning. And I'm finding ways to reach out to people that can help really fine tune, and, you know, but that's how I started.
So then it is a class, a supportive class could help, or maybe even a writer's group to help you stay disciplined, because that's the challenge, right? Most writers face in creativity is, you know, like I know a lot of writers who are like, I write when I'm in the mood, right? And it'll be 10 years and nothing was ever finished because there is that discipline aspect of being creative that you've mastered.
Right. And even a writing partner. I find I work really well with writing partners for screenplays. I seem to do better that way. So I'm actually actively trying to do that now, you know, to seek out writing partners.
That's good.
Yeah.
You know, even Woodhull Press started as a writer's group. You know,
Oh, no.
I love writers groups and I love
Yeah.
book clubs. I'm a big advocate. I just think community is really, even in what we're doing right now,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
community. All
Absolutely.
right, so I'm curious, right? So because try to keep this within a half hour. I have so many
Yeah, yeah.
questions.
Let's do it.
What does that artistic success mean to you, right? You've done this, you've been in this industry, you've been in LA, which is no, I mean, I hear about all these people go out to LA and then they come back like, you know, 2 years later. You've gone to LA, you've stayed in LA, you've made a career out of art, right? In all its various facets. So what does that success ultimately look like to you at this point?
Um,
It's loaded. That's a big
it's
question.
such a great question. And for me, my personal philosophy, what I've sort of come to believe is that artistic success is freedom, you know. And I can't say that I'm necessarily going to get there in this lifetime. I don't know that I will, but I personally believe a truly successful artist is someone who speaks from their heart and says what they need to say, regardless of whether or not they make money or they are admired or they are put on a pedestal or not. And again, I think I'm far from it. But even I think of somebody like Banksy, you know, who he does art for art's sake, and it says something. And he doesn't. Yeah, sure, he has a certain notoriety, but you get the sense that he doesn't do it for fame or for money, you know. And to me, that's the ultimate success. If you can make money, that's awesome, and there's no shame in that. I'm definitely not a person who says, like, if you're an artist, you must be struggling and starving at all times. I don't believe that either. But I do think that continually tying back into, and as you evolve as an artist, into your true, you know, voice is artistic success.
Yeah, I love that. It's the pursuit of the passion, right? And if I mean, my mom always told me when I was younger, do what you love, and then the money will follow. And sometimes the money follows,
Yeah.
but what does follow always is the love and enjoyment of what you're doing. And I think that's oftentimes the success. So, you
Absolutely.
know, what's coming from someone who's been in the industry, right? As you're a writer, you've done all these things. Do you have a kind of just a piece of advice for people that are listening? Like, you know, I think you've kind of touched on a lot of points on discipline. That's kind of one of the things I'm reminding myself that you said is get disciplined. But what's another just kind of a piece of advice that you would impart on people listening?
Oh man, that's a very good question.
I know it's 9 a.m. I'm just like bombarding
I
you.
know, no, it's great. I love it. I love it. Oh, I think it's cultivating daily practices, I think, would be my biggest advice. I think we have a tendency to feel like everything has to happen all at once, you know, or we have to find that right button to push and suddenly everything will magically, you know, happen for us. But I think, and it ties back into what you just said, is like, how can you develop even small daily practices to nourish what you want, and actually what you want to feel. I think focusing on how you want to feel, I think, is more important than what you want to get or achieve, because you can achieve an Oscar and you can be standing up there receiving it and feel like crap and then it's like, who cares? So I think deciding how you want to feel in your life and finding ways to daily nurture that into your future, that would be my biggest advice.
Oh, I love that. So that idea of how you want to feel, right? It's because how often do we actually think to ourselves, you know, I want to feel content today. I want to feel happy today, or whatever it is. Like you're trying to feel something and working toward those aims.
Right. Yeah.
That's
So
good.
to me, it almost becomes a bit of a spiritual practice, you know, because
Yeah.
I think what most of us want is some kind of self-fulfillment, you know, some kind of satisfaction, or contentment is probably a better word, because, you know, satisfaction, like they say, you can't get no satisfaction. It's,
Ah.
it's fleeting. But yeah, how can you nurture that, more of that?
So what's been the most difficult part of your artistic process?
And still is. Yeah, for me, I think it's doubt and overthinking. You know, yeah, for me, I think it's that constant, is it worth it? You know, is it even going to be good? Is anybody going to read it? Does it make any sense? You know, and you cycle through those over and over, and they make that path very jerky. And I think pushing through that and connecting back to doing it for the sake of doing it, because you love it, because you have something to say, even if only one person reads it. You know, sometimes I have to tell myself that, like, look, if I write this whole thing, but when only one person reads it, but the one person gets it and connects to it, that's enough. The fact that I'm fulfilled in, getting it out of me, that's enough,
So you mentioned how often it's worth it. How often actually is it worth it for you, right? Like, how often do you feel, or is it always worth it? Or do you have like a threshold? You're like, it's about worth it 50%, or like, what is it?
I think one of the toughest lessons I've learned is how many of your darlings, as they say, you have to let go of.
Yeah.
I have to say letting go is not my strength. I'm still learning to do that. And I'm learning to recognize that they are such a key part of the process, and you can still love them, and you learn so much from them. But I think that easily 80% of it, you end up discarding, But if you think of it as like a sculptor who has to throw away bits and pieces of marble, or even an actor, we do several takes, and they don't always choose our best cake, So you only see about 10% of all of the work that we did, So I think it's kind of common that happens, and that's why you have to keep coming back to the process and not the results, and that's one of the biggest struggles too, I think.
Everything you're saying, reminds me that I have to keep a crazy schedule. Like, I actually have multiple, and I have an Excel spreadsheet where I actually budget out.
You do more than I do, David. I don't know how you do it.
Well, that's what I'm wondering is, how do you keep track? Like, is there, I often find time management to be kind of like an issue. As you're talking about all these things, I'm saying to myself, I'm like, yeah, I agree, but like, how do you budget that time?
I'm still trying to figure that out. A lot of times, thank God my boyfriend cooks dinner every night and helps me with the dog, because some days I'm just like, I want to do these 7 things, and I need to do 1 to 2 hours for each one. I definitely think you need a lot of support. 1, 2, I think it's some planning and self-discipline, but I think it's also some learning to go with the flow, because especially in my business and where I actually do get some income, it's so relationship oriented that even though as a writer and artist, I want to kind of schedule out my day and shut everybody else out, I also have auditions popping in and voiceover auditions. And then suddenly a friend calls me and is like, I'm doing a film. And if I, learn to go like, okay, this is coming, I have to receive it, and I will come back to that. It's a lot of job. I think it's a very messy process, and I'm not sure that there's a very straightforward answer to that one.
It sounds like the essence is stay malleable, but also organized, but kind of roll with it.
For me, stay committed, I think, to your
I love to do my new thing is I give myself 3 things that I know I can get done today, and it just feels so good to just see those 3 things. Like, I'm like, all right, those 3 things are done. Even if the larger list, right?
Yeah, like realistic expectations too,
Yeah.
I think I've struggled with, well, I'm going to do these 500 things, and I only do, 5, and I feel like crap. But I think I've learned to do that too. Like, okay, if I just do these things that I know that I can do as realistically, it actually builds your confidence instead of, in your time management and what you can accomplish, versus just like overloading yourself and putting way too much pressure, which I've been very guilty of.
Oh yeah, 100%. So we've got what's been kind of the most, challenging parts of the artistic process. Do you have anything that you just reflect back on and it's by far the most rewarding aspect of everything you've done? Can you just be like a moment in time from like 3 years ago when you were just sitting on the beach looking out at something and you just said, this is it? But like, is there, what's that most rewarding moment for you through this?
I think the shortest answer is sharing. I think that when you make something, that the best feeling is when you share it and somebody else, even in my writers group, where the first time I brought up writing and where they were all cold reading, but if somebody laughed because they saw themselves or somebody even cried, that was like the best feeling ever. And I felt that way when I was writing songs and singing songs. Sharing a song like for the first time, a new song is like, and other people hearing it, I think that connection is the best part.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love just the way you kind of touch on all of it. You're like, oh, when I was singing this song and I'm in this band and I do this screenplay, you look at art not as a separate piece, right, of a pie, but it's just a total. Like it's all just something to be savored. And I think that's something that I'm taking away from this conversation. All right. So lastly, 3 things I ask everybody. Okay. 1, coffee or tea? Every artist has their divide, and I'm curious. I like forming an idea in my head. Right.
Well, if it's coffee or tea, I have to go with tea. However, if it's espresso with milk, because I'm not drip coffee is like kind of I would go for tea if I had to choose between drip coffee and tea. But if there's an espresso, I would espresso myself.
All right. What gets you up every day? Quote, motto, song, something that what gets you up into the air each morning, gets you moving?
I'm not good at waking up in the morning, but I actually take about an hour every morning just to sit and drink my tea or my espresso, and try to not look at my phone as much as possible and either journal or sometimes I meditate or sometimes I literally just sit. Nice. And I don't even know if I'm answering your questions right now, but yeah, I think for me, I need that time to sort of reacquaint myself with this life and approach it again. So yeah, I think that's what keeps me going. I just get up and take a moment to look at the world.
I like this. One thing I like that you say sometimes you just kind of get up each day and you don't try to embrace the taking care of business. Like you just might sit in silence. You might just sit in a chair and reflect. And I don't think a lot of us even think about that. And that's an important piece that I'm actually going to try doing this afternoon.
Yeah, I like find that. It helpful.
And lastly, anything for the people listening? Like, is there a final piece of just advice, a tip, just anything?
Yeah, well, everything we've been talking about makes me think of one of my favorite quotes, and I know I'm not gonna say it exact, but when you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. When you don't bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. And actually, I think it's from the Bible, but I'm not religious, but I think it's such a beautiful saying, and I think as artists, I think that's very true. I think that I find that if I am not expressing myself or writing or finding some creative mode, I become not as good of a person. I'm not as happy, I'm much more irritable. And I think creativity, I think the last thought I'll share is creativity can happen in so many different ways. And it doesn't have to be something that you finish and tie up nicely in a bow and offer up to the world and make $1 million with. Sometimes it's just how you plate your food after you cooked, or you know what I mean, or how you decorate your house, or so I think finding ways to just express yourself and be creative is such a wonderful way to just be acquainted with constantly developing who you are, and discovering.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. So thank you. Thank you for being on here today.
Thank you.
For everybody, be sure to check out Ellie Araiza at elliearaiza.com, ARIVA.com.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, email me, david@woodhallpress.com. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for everyone who stopped by. And you can also find me. I'm at Ellie Araiza on all social media. You'll find it on my website as well. And I'm happy to be in touch if anybody has any further questions. Thank you guys for joining us. And thank you, David, for inviting me to be here. This was awesome.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.